Hi, everybody. I'm Brittany Lewis, a breaking news reporter here at Forbes. Joining me now is Adam Goodman, partner at Ballard Partners. Adam, thanks so much for coming on.
Great to be with you, and it's such a fun period in the nation's history.
It's really exciting to talk with you today because it's an extension of our last conversation in December. This week, we watched some Trump cabinet nominees testify at Senate confirmation hearings. You and I talked about some of them back in December, as I said, like Pam Bondi, like Senator Marco Rubio, and I want to dive a little deeper here. So first, let's start with potentially, probably, reportedly, the person who is going to have the easiest time getting confirmed, and that's Senator Marco Rubio for Secretary of State. What did you make of his testimony?
Well, I've known Marco for many years, as many people have in the state of Florida. And America, even though, of course, he ran for president, so a lot more of America got a good, solid taste of Marco then as well, and he ran a very, very good race. He's been preparing for this moment from day one. And when I say from day one, from the time that he and his family, came to America and lived that experience and came to appreciate things that you and I and so many others take for granted. And he became a very early adopter of a different view of America and the world. And he is thankful to be here. He is thankful that the country is in the position it is in the world, but he is also sobered by the fact it could be lost or torn asunder in the flash of an event. And he wants to be a part of taking Donald Trump's foreign policy, which is going to be not only more aggressive, but it's going to be fundamentally different, Brittany, than anything we've seen in our lifetime. They're going to do things differently. It's not about reestablishing American power and influence. It's about reminding the world about our intentions and that we will absolutely follow through with those intentions, as opposed to we're politicking the moment, we're trying diplomacy when diplomacy has failed, that we will do things that others weren't willing to do. We will say things that others are not willing to say, have not been willing to say. And Marco Rubio will hit the ground running. He's a strong foreign policy hawk. That means that this country is going to be stronger and more deadly serious about how they go after foreign policy. I can tell you that leaders in China and elsewhere have paid great attention, not just to Donald Trump's reascension on the world stage, but also Marco Rubio. And Marco Rubio, I think, and Donald Trump are completely in parallel, Brittany, with each other. Like you might argue, the entire cabinet that's up for confirmation, you've got a team of players, unlike 2017, who are all rowing in the same direction with the same central mission, as opposed to a group of people with tremendous background experience and resume, some of whom might not be totally into what the president wants to achieve.
That's a really interesting way to look at it because the cabinet nominees, I think, really reflect that they're a lot different than what we saw in Trump's first term. So what do you think foreign policy specifically would look like under Marco Rubio? He came out swinging at China, calling it our biggest threat and saying we have an unbalanced relationship with the country. He talked about Panama because Donald Trump said that he would want the United States to reclaim control of the canal. He kind of said, he predicted that the argument could be made that the original terms of handing over the canal were violated, but Panama is a great partner. So what do you think in terms of foreign policy? What will that look like with Marco Rubio as Secretary of State?
Well, first of all, he's going to be carrying out the wishes of the president, right? So that's job number one. I think that you could pick your spot. Take a look at Ukraine. Ukraine seems to have drifted into a period of kind of a hopeless square off in a way, intransigence by all parties involved and with no end in sight. I think with President Trump and Marco Rubio, we have a real chance to bring that in for a landing. I think the agreement that we just saw between Hamas and the state of Israel was at least partly because both parties understood what the Trump administration, where they were on this issue and what they meant. And when Trump said there'll be hell to pay if Hamas doesn't come to the table. I really think that was a major reason why the deal that was initiated by the Biden administration, that they were able to close the deal. Because I don't think the Biden administration was even close to that mark until Donald Trump was the president-elect, and everyone over there said, uh-oh, it's time to fall in line, including those who don't necessarily have the best wishes of the Western world at heart. Then you said Panama. Take a look at all Latin America and Marco Rubio. I think we as a country have really taken our eye off the ball in terms of strengthening our alliances across the Southern Hemisphere. I mean, these are people and countries that are, for the most part, are motivated to want to have a very strong, good relationship with the United States of America. But I think in recent times, and I'm not just putting this on the Biden administration, I think we have kind of stopped showing up. And when you don't show up in that part of the world, they understand that's a signal that you don't care as much. We have the ability to consider in a real way nearshoring, where we take more of the production of vital and critical assets back into our neighborhood, so to speak, as opposed to being worried about China suddenly closing the faucet on things like prescription drugs that are saving lives. So I think Marco Rubio is going to initiate a Latin American outreach unlike anything we've seen, Brittany, in a very long time. The Panama situation in particular, I think, is the President of the United States putting on his negotiator hat, right? And saying, look, we think we deserve a better deal here. And I think that's really what is underneath that. I can't speak to Greenland. That's a whole nother issue for a whole nother set of reasons. But I think that Americans can feel good about the fact that the Secretary of State to be, Marco Rubio, really is smart, knows the process that the world goes through to get to decisions, knows where America and where the President of the United States wants America to be. And I think he's going to be incredibly successful. He's well liked, I think, across the aisle here in America. I think you'll find he'll be well liked by the world as well.
And I think he definitely has his work cut out for him there. He's got a lot of different situations to handle for sure, but he's been on the national stage now for almost a decade. Someone who has entered that stage more recently is former Florida AG Pam Bondi, who is now Trump's AG nominee. And she was questioned repeatedly if she could remain independent of influence from Trump during her hearing. That was one of the main themes. Overall, what did you think of her performance this past week?
Okay, so I'm biased, but the disclaimer up front. I've worked with Pam. I've known Pam for over 15 years. I've worked with Pam from the beginning, from the idea that spawned her race for Attorney General and onto today. She basically delivered a very clear and simple message in that hearing. I am here to represent the people of the United States. I am here to make sure we have one tier of justice. I'm here to try to fight the weaponization of justice, which I think it's fair to say has been in play for far too long and impacting both sides of the aisle, and has also completely infected, Brittany, public confidence that Americans have in justice. And at least, just like the ballot, if we don't believe in our electoral system, in the integrity of our electoral system, everything starts to fall apart. I think justice is as important as that, if not even more important, if there's a sense of unequal justice, depending on who you know, who you are, and who you support.
And I think it was an interesting moment during one of the questions. It was contentious between her and Senator Schiff, her and Senator Padilla, both from California. And she stopped and she said, I'm here for all of Americans. I will help you with the wildfires if there's crimes there. Senator Kennedy, I'll help you in Louisiana when we saw that terrorist attack on New Year's Day. Based on the hearings, how do you see her approaching the DOJ?
With fresh eyes. It's interesting. We talked about, Marco with all of his background and his skills, whatever. Pam, she was in office for 8 years. She was a prosecutor for 20 years before that. But in terms of the Department of Justice, she's obviously interacted with the Department of Justice as Attorney General of Florida. there's a freshness to it, and there's also kind of she shares in the mission, and the mission is we're going to look at everything anew. We're going to make sure that the FBI is doing the things they need to be doing the way they should be doing it with fresh eyes. And those things that are not fulfilling that central mission of doing it without, biasing it towards ideology or partisanship, whatever, if those are in play, we're going to take those out. We're going to change those things. And she said repeatedly during the hearing, when hypotheticals were thrown at her, don't give me hypotheticals. Give me the facts. We will sit down, we will look at the facts, and I guarantee you we will do everything we can to bring forth justice based on those facts that is blind to ideology, partisanship, and everything else. That, I think, came through loud and clear. The Democrats on the panel were really insistent on two things. One, are you really going to be independent of the President of the United States, right? I can tell you that Pam, from day one, as a member of the state attorney's office in Hillsborough County, Florida, up to this very moment, when she says law and order, she means it. When she says, I'll put my hand on the Bible and take an oath, swearing, I will uphold justice, she means it. That's first and foremost. I remember going to a graduation ceremony at Stetson University, where she was the commencement speaker to all these soon-to-be lawyers, right? How proud she was to be a part of that moment because she takes the law seriously, right? The other thing, though, the Democrats went at, beyond independence, was whether or not she would be more declarative about the 2020 election. That, I don't know about you, drove me wild. I mean, she basically was asked her view on whether it was a legitimate election. What she said was she accepted the swearing in and the elevation of Joe Biden as president of the United States and saw him as her president. At the same time, she was in Philadelphia and other places where she saw things happening in 2020 that were not right. Now, was that enough to overturn the election? That's one of the great ongoing debates. But she saw things that weren't right. That's what she was trying to say in that committee. So effectively, what her answer is, and which was not satisfactory to the Democrats who wanted to create a headline, it was, look, he's the president. I agreed, I hope everyone agreed he is the legitimate president. How he got there was everything was, say, kosher, that in the 2020 election, she would probably in a moment of candor say no. Was it enough to overturn that election? That, of course, is one of the great questions of debate. I don't think she has to answer that. I thought she was really good there, but I thought some of the aggressiveness by the Democrats toward Pam was unwarranted. I'd single out the senator from Hawaii, who I think almost was taking it personally and trying to make statement after statement as opposed to listening to what Pam was trying to offer as her response to the statement / questions that she was posing. America saw that as well. But the other thing you saw in all of that, Brittany, she gave no ground either. She's someone that not only wears her heart on her sleeve, she's got a very strong, tough, confident Constitution, meaning, and she is all about the Constitution. And that's going to be very important for her in this job, not just as it comes to dealing with particular cases, but in reinstilling confidence among the American people that we can believe in our system of justice today more than ever before.
I wanted to ask you about the election denialism specifically because during those contentious moments, a senator, I believe it was Senator Padilla, was saying yes or no about election denialism and the like, and she's trying to answer. And as a reporter, I'm just like, please, I want to hear her answer so I can write it down, prepare for this interview. And instead, it's cutting her off when she's not saying yes or no. She did say President Biden is president of the United States. He was duly sworn in, and he is the president of the United States. Do you think that's a sufficient answer? And A, and B, when you hear questions like that, when senators are just trying to get a yes or no from both sides of the aisle, when you look at other hearings, do you think those senators are trying to get a viral moment? Because Is that what the American people want to hear? Do they want to hear the yes or no answers, or do they want to look to the future? What do you think?
I love your question. Of course, the senators who are asking questions, not even questions, their statements that way, they're trying for their moment. There was a senator on the Democratic side, Senator Coons from Delaware, who asked us a series of questions. And the way he asked them, I was really proud as an American to see someone from the other party who was asking direct questions, but allowing the person being interviewed to actually respond. And it wasn't in a gotcha-like spirit. It was more in an informational spirit. There were things that he was concerned about. He asked them appropriately. She answered appropriately. I think in terms of, you talk about election denialism and whatever, we can't keep living in the past. 2020 will always be an asterisk for some people. Like when I went through 2000, I was in the state of Florida during the recount next to Katherine Harris, right? So I was right there at the table, right? With everything on the line, with the final verdict being a 537 vote. Of course, I remember that to this moment, 537 vote difference, and how there were people that would never accept that was the verdict. And frankly, our election system is such, if you have a 537 vote margin with 8.7 million votes cast, none of us, you or I or anybody, will absolutely and forever know truly what happened and what the real number was. Bottom line, it was the best attempt by human beings in a razor thin election to try to come up with something, a number, a result that truly was defensible. That's the best we could have done, because there is nothing in technology, there is nothing we've ever invented yet that can get us to completely 100% agree with an election result that is determined by a smattering of votes among millions cast. There's just no way to get there. So I like the fact that Senator Coons and some others, Senator Booker from New Jersey, I think really were good in that hearing. But I think people turn off when all they're hearing is a bunch, and seeing and feeling is a bunch of politicians trying to score points, when the confirmation hearings by design are supposed to give the American people a sense, many for the first time, of a major potential leader in a major part of government. And not only about what they want to do and what they're saying, it's how they're saying it. Can they measure up to the moment? Are they good when the heat in the kitchen is turned up? Those are things we want to know, but we're not getting it when the honorable senator from Hawaii and some others, California, Senator Schiff, are trying so desperately to put her back in her chair, as opposed to allow Americans to make that judgment for themselves about what they feel about the nominee.
Before I let you go, I want to ask about arguably the most heated, most controversial hearing of the week, and that's Pete Hegseth for Defense Secretary. And as you know, he's faced a flurry of allegations regarding sexual abuse, financial mismanagement, and drunken and inappropriate behavior around colleagues. He was questioned about that repeatedly. What did you make of the hearing?
Fascinating hearing. Great live television, right? If you like live theater, you really like that hearing. He had two things he had to achieve. One was to say more about himself, because Pete Hegseth is known inside the bubble here in D.C., but very little outside. And the other was to basically address the accusations that have been made. And this is where the individual has to make a decision for themselves, not Pete Hegseth, but you and I and the rest of the American public. What he said was, I'm not a perfect person. There are things I've done I regret. But he believes in Jesus Christ and in redemption, right? And if you believe in redemption and second chances, then I think you give him a break here. If you don't, maybe you don't give him a break. But what is lost in all this, Pete Hegseth represents a fundamentally different kind of nominee to lead a major department of government. For a defense secretary to be from the ranks and not from the brass, to have a resume of carrying and pushing the envelope as opposed to a long, distinguished service record. That's different for America. But it was that previous model that has caused the Department of Defense to be so bloody wasteful of tax dollars to have so many programs on so many arms and munitions running amok without any decent result. There was one kind of attitude, one philosophy that was driving the Defense Department for a generation or two, frankly, Brittany. I think what Pete Hegseth represents, and the reason that Donald Trump picked someone like Pete Hegseth, he is going to push that system to be accountable. And maybe because he has fewer friends, we'll say, in the Pentagon going in, you might say that's going to make his job more difficult. It also makes it more noble and potentially gives him a chance to do what others would be nervous or shy about doing, and taking on a very entrenched defense establishment that I think needs to adjust more than ever to the modern world.
I know that he said he wants to be a change agent here, but Tim Kaine in his questioning said you cheated on your second wife, got a colleague, and now your third wife pregnant. And when 2 months later, there was the allegations of sexual abuse, but you said you cheated on that wife. Do you think, A, that questioning was fair, and B, do you think that past behavior matters these days when you're talking about this high of a position here? Shouldn't they be held? Do you think they should be held to a higher standard?
Every one of us is imperfect. Every one of us makes mistakes in life. Pete Hegseth is no exception. Were the questions coming from Senator Kaine legitimate and necessary? You could argue they were, because those are the things that have been talked about in the narrative surrounding Pete Hegseth for the last month or better. He had to respond to those questions, had to. And I'm happy that Senator Kaine kind of packs it all together and put it all out there. And Pete answered that. And you have to give a lot of credit. Imagine his wife, who's sitting right behind him, going through this hearing, especially that part of the hearing. And yet, I think if you say, does past character matter? Yes. Is perfection required for leadership? No, it is absolutely not. And there's no leader in America or anywhere else that has lived a perfect life and has things they regret. Will Pete Hegseth, most importantly, is he prepared to basically put in place a Trump agenda, which is to fundamentally improve, economize, and make more efficient, more effective America's armed forces? I think the answer is yes. He is absolutely, fully bought in to that as his mission, and I think he's going to do everything he can to deliver that with the full support of the president.
It was must-watch TV, as you said, and all of them were. It's important to understand who these people are going to be if they are confirmed. Did you learn anything additional or any indication of what you think the next 4 years are going to be based on any new snippet you learned in these hearings?
It was a confirmation of what we were been told by Donald Trump about what he wants to do in the next 4 years. A total confirmation that I mean it. Right? I meant what I said during the campaign, and I needed, maybe he wouldn't say this, he'd never admit this, the president, that maybe he needed those 4 years to figure it out, right? The first 4 years, because I think he had a lot of successes, but he had some misses too, because I think he wasn't as familiar with the process and with Washington, D.C. and politics as he now is. I think he needed those 4 years. He's now learned from that. I think he's more confident than I've ever seen him before. I think he is actually more approachable than I've ever seen Donald Trump before. I think he's going to be a different kind of president, but his legacy, as he sees it, is not about winning only for the Trump name. It's going to be about delivering the kind of change that's bothered him, that has not happened for so many years, delivering that before he leaves office. And if we ever had a chance to measure up to what the American people said they are really tired about, they are really upset the system seems broken, things aren't working right, where's American leadership, all those things we've been complaining about for many years. I think we finally have a chance to see someone coming in with a team behind them that really means to get it done. And how that change happens, how much of that change happens, is going to be the final measure on how you and I and the rest of America feel about the investment in a second term in Donald Trump and this kind of team that means it as much as he does in delivering.
Well, there are certainly a lot more conversations to be had as we look at Donald Trump's inauguration, his first 100 days, his next 4 years, and I hope you can join me in all of them. Adam Goodman, per usual, a great conversation. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks. Great to be with you.